Malthusian Time and the Recovery of Attention. The first act of reconstruction under Malthusian time is not productivity, it is attention. This distinction matters because modern people often attempt to recover their lives by becoming more efficient before they have decided what deserves efficiency. They try to optimize the machinery of existence while leaving its purpose unresolved. They purchase planners, install apps, watch lectures, adopt routines, track habits, and redesign workflows, yet the deeper crisis remains untouched because the central wound is not merely disorganization, it's dispossession. The modern individual has lost sovereignty over attention. His mind is no longer wholly his own territory. It has become a contested province, crossed daily by advertisers, algorithms, political movements, professional obligations, entertainment systems, social pressures, news cycles, status anxieties, and invisible habits. Every external force seeks entry. Every platform wants recurrence. Every ideology wants emotional investment. Every device wants acknowledgement. Every institution wants a portion of consciousness. The person who cannot govern attention cannot govern life. This is the basic truth from which recovery must begin. Under Malthusian time, attention is not a minor psychological faculty. It is the gate through which finite existence is spent. Whatever receives attention receives life in its most immediate form. A man may claim to value God, family, truth, craft, health, country, beauty, discipline, or wisdom, but if his attention belongs continuously to triviality, then his practical religion is triviality. The official creed matters less than the daily expenditure of consciousness. Attention reveals worship. This is why the recovery of attention must be treated with seriousness bordering on reverence. Modern language often cheapens attention by reducing it to performance, productivity, or concentration technique. One is told to focus in order to achieve more, earn more, produce more, or compete more effectively. There is nothing wrong with achievement rightly ordered, but this framing remains insufficient. Attention is not merely an economic instrument. It is sacred territory because it determines the shape of the soul. A person becomes, slowly and invisibly, what he repeatedly attends to. Attend constantly to outrage, and the soul becomes inflamed. Attend constantly to comparison, and the soul becomes envious. Attend constantly to eroticized imagery, and the soul becomes disordered. Attend constantly to fear, and the soul becomes timid. Attend constantly to triviality, and the soul becomes weightless. Attend to wisdom, scripture, beauty, duty, craft, silence, love, and serious thought, and the soul begins recovering gravity. This is not mysticism. It is ordinary moral formation. Attention deposits impressions into the inner life. Repetition deepens grooves. What first appears as a choice becomes a habit. What becomes a habit becomes disposition. What becomes disposition eventually feels like identity. Thus, the battle for attention is simultaneously the battle for character. Malthusian time intensifies this battle because modern systems do not merely wait for attention, they pursue it. They interrupt, suggest, seduce, provoke, recommend, notify, and repeat. Their objective is not occasional use, but habitual return. The modern platform desires not simply a visit, but a loop. It wants to become the default answer to boredom, loneliness, uncertainty, fatigue, anger, lust, curiosity, and silence. That final word is crucial. Silence is now one of the most endangered conditions of the modern mind. Not silence as mere absence of sound, but silence as absence of demand. The older world possessed many involuntary silences: darkness, distance, slow travel, limited literacy, seasonal rhythms, and technological constraint all imposed pauses. These pauses were not always pleasant, but they created space in which the mind could encounter itself without immediate escape. Modern life has largely abolished involuntary silence. For anyone carrying a connected device, every gap can be filled. Every cue, journey, meal, pause, hesitation, and lonely evening can be instantly occupied. The result is that many people no longer discover whether they can bear silence because they have eliminated nearly every occasion for testing it. Yet silence is not empty. Silence is where hidden things begin speaking. It is where buried anxiety surface, where neglected convictions return, where conscience becomes audible, where prayer deepens, where memory assembles itself, where thought moves beyond reaction, where the individual discovers what remains when stimulation withdraws. This is precisely why silence frightens the modern person. He often says he's bored, but boredom is sometimes only the first layer of withdrawal from constant occupation. Beneath boredom may lie grief. Beneath boredom may lie guilt. Beneath boredom may lie unchosen purpose. Beneath boredom may lie the terrifying realization that much of life has been spent reacting rather than living. The recovery of attention, therefore, begins with tolerating silence long enough for consciousness to become honest again. This cannot be simulated by productivity systems. It cannot be downloaded. It cannot be outsourced. It requires the patient refusal of interruption. Deep focus belongs to the same discipline. In an age of fragmentation, the ability to remain with one's serious object of attention becomes almost aristocratic. Not aristocratic in the social sense, but in the sense of nobility of mind. The scattered person is governed by whatever appears next. The focused person establishes rank. He says, implicitly, this deserves precedence over the swarm. Deep focus is therefore an act of hierarchy. To read a serious book for an hour is to declare that the book matters more than the feed. To pray without checking the phone is to declare that communication with God matters more than notifications. To write, study, build, practice, walk or think in sustained fashion is to reclaim duration from the market of interruptions. This is why reading deserves special attention within the reconstruction of the self. Deep reading is one of the great antidotes to Malthusian time because it trains the mind to submit voluntarily to ordered duration. A serious book does not arrive as a feed arrives. It does not reshuffle itself every few seconds to preserve stimulation. It does not flatter impatience. It demands sequence, memory, inference, patience, and surrender to another mind's architecture. To read deeply is to inhabit thought rather than merely sample information. This matters because modern people increasingly confuse exposure with understanding. They have heard of many things, watched summaries of many things, skimmed arguments about many things, and absorbed fragments from countless domains, yet fragments do not necessarily become knowledge. Knowledge requires integration, and integration requires time. A civilization that loses deep reading gradually loses the ability to sustain deep argument, deep memory, deep doctrine, deep imagination, and deep dissent. It becomes reactive, programmable, excitable, and shallow. It may possess information in abundance while becoming increasingly incapable of wisdom. Reading is not the only path toward recovered attention, but it remains one of the most powerful because it resists the tempo of the age. It slows consciousness down to the speed of meaning. It forces continuity. It disciplines impatience. It reminds the individual that not everything valuable arrives instantly. Solitude is equally necessary, though often misunderstood. Solitude is not loneliness. Loneliness is deprivation of communion. Solitude is deliberate withdrawal for the sake of interior order. It is the condition in which a person ceases performing for others long enough to discover what he actually thinks, believes, fears, desires, and serves. Modern society offers enormous quantities of connection while often starving people of solitude. The individual is visible before he is formed. He speaks before he has reflected. He reacts before he has judged. He broadcasts before he has understood. Social media in particular encourages premature externalization of the self. Thoughts become posts before they become convictions. Emotions become performances before they become understood. Identity becomes display before it becomes character. Solitude interrupts this process. It returns the individual to inwardness. In solitude, one may ask the questions that the attention economy desperately prefers to bury beneath motion. What am I becoming? What do I repeatedly choose when no one is watching? Which desires govern me? Which fears organize my days? Which voices have I mistaken for my own? Which habits are spending my life without permission? These questions cannot be answered while constantly stimulated. They require distance from the crowd, even when the crowd is digital and silent. The recovery of attention, then, is not a retreat from reality. It is a return to reality. The distracted person often mistakes stimulation for contact with the world, yet his experience is heavily mediated by systems designed to provoke response. The attentive person encounters reality more directly because he has ceased allowing every external actor to arrange his consciousness for him. This recovery will not happen accidentally. The default condition of technological civilization is interruption. To recover attention, the individual must create deliberate boundaries. Devices must be devoted. Notifications must be refused. Certain platforms must be limited or abandoned. Reading must be scheduled. Silence must be protected. Solitude must be normalized. Serious work must be defended against trivial entry. The point is not legalism, the point is sovereignty. A man does not build walls around a city because he hates the world outside. He builds walls because what is inside has value. Likewise, the disciplined person places boundaries around attention not because he rejects life, but because he understands that life enters through attention and can therefore be stolen through it. This is the hopeful turn within Malthusian time. If attention can be stolen, it can also be reclaimed. If consciousness can be fragmented, it can also be gathered. If silence has been lost, it can be recovered. If the soul has been scattered across 1,000 trivialities, it can begin returning to order. But the recovery is slow because the damage is habitual. One cannot spend years training attention toward interruption and then expect depth to return instantly. At first, silence will feel uncomfortable. Reading may feel difficult. Prayer may feel restless. Solitude may feel strange. Deep work may feel almost physically irritating because the nervous system has become accustomed to stimulation. This discomfort should not be mistaken for failure. It is withdrawal from fragmentation. The mind is learning how to dwell. The goal is not to become an anti-technological hermit that would merely repeat the fantasy of going back. The goal is to become a person capable of using modern abundance without being consumed by it. The internet may remain a library rather than a labyrinth. The smartphone may remain a tool rather than a master. Entertainment may remain recreation rather than sedation. Work may remain vocation rather than total identity. For this to happen, attention must recover its rightful hierarchy. Some things deserve brief attention. Some things deserve no attention. Some things deserve recurring attention. Some things deserve lifelong attention. Wisdom lies in knowing the difference. The modern world will not teach this distinction automatically because too many institutions profit from its collapse. If everything feels urgent, nothing can be ranked properly. If every notification receives equal obedience, the mind loses nobility. If every passing stimulus gains entry, the soul becomes common ground for every trespasser. The recovery of attention is therefore an act of consecration. It is the decision that finite consciousness will not be surrendered casually. It is the recognition that one's days are not raw material for platforms, movements, markets, anxieties, and appetites to consume at will. It is the beginning of temporal stewardship. If a person can recover his life, he must recover the faculty by which life is spent. That faculty is attention. And under Malthusian time, to pay attention rightly may become one of the highest forms of freedom left to modern man.